Welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and I'm here to help you excel through the stories you tell. But being a compelling business storyteller is hard for some because it takes focused, deliberate practice. That's why I consult, teach, coach, and speak internationally, helping leaders just like you become confident and persuasive communicators, to help you connect with audiences like you never have before, and to excite them to action. I would be delighted to bring you and your team one of my in-person or virtual storytelling mastery classes or mastery course. Or you can even take advantage of my ABTs of Selling online training right now. Either way, please let me know when I can bring the business of story to your world. And until then, enjoy today's show. I'm so glad you're here. I can't tell you how many times I hear attendees in one of my Business of Story masterclasses or mastery courses say, well, Park, your storytelling frameworks may work in sales, but I'm not a salesperson. I and my guest today beg to differ.
Everybody's a seller. Everybody is. You're all representing your company, whether or not you're on normal productive company calls or whether you are talking to your grandmother. You're still selling. Every single part of my day is selling something. My people, my programs, my successes, my ideas. I'm doing that every single day, all day long.
Sheevaun Thatcher knows a thing or two about sales, from a bag-carrying seller to an international pre-sales leader, and now as president of Global Digital Learning and Enablement at RingCentral. Sheevaun leads a team who trains between 5,000 and 6,000 colleagues annually on everything from how to support sales to customer success and support, channel and partner engagement, global corporate-wide onboarding, innovation training, product marketing, curriculum design, digital e-learning, and video production. In fact, Sheevaun had one training video viewed over 1 million times in just 4 days. During her career working with global enterprise sales teams and domestic startups, she has learned that performance is dictated not only by innate talent, but also by targeted and creative programs that focus on your customer's vision of their future. And what is a customer's vision of their future? Well, it's the story they see themselves living into and how you can be there to help them get what they want out of life. So today, Sheevaun and I discuss what the core elements of sales enablement are, how to use storytelling to secure and build relationships, and we touch a bit on presentation skills. All that and more on this special edition of the Business of Story with Sheevaun Thatcher of RingCentral. Sheevaun, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
This is so great. And once again, I have to thank my good friend, Alice Hyman, for connecting us and all the amazing work that you do in enablement, both sales enablement and even outside of the sales realm. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, the importance of enablement. So real quick, and then we're going to jump into your backstory a little bit. How do you define enablement? Because I use that term with some other businesses and people kind of look at me sort of funny and don't know what I mean.
So there's a couple of ways to define it. When I talk about it from a business perspective, I've got investors, I've got a supply chain, I've got customers, right? So it's from a business perspective, consider that. From a description of what enablement is, there are 4 parts to enablement as I see it. And the first part is understanding the go-to-market. Right? Do you know what your company does and why they do it? Right? Not, because when I started at RingCentral, for example, I would ask people, what does RingCentral do? And the answer was, we do phones in the cloud. That's not what we do. What we do is we connect people regardless of where they are, when they are, and how they want to connect, right? That's what we do, is we provide connection. That's the first part, is understanding the go-to-market, understanding the strategy, making sure that everybody understands it as well. Right? Because last year's strategy isn't going to be this year's strategy. Does everybody get it? Regardless of whether you're in sales or otherwise. Second part of it is all of the assets, everything that has to do in support of this particular go-to-market. Are they on message? And are they current? And is there a single version of them? Again, When I started, there were 10 or more versions of the corporate deck, and everybody had it on their laptop. And they were using, I still occasionally, rarely now, but occasionally I will see a deck pop up where the copyright date is 2015. Anybody who knows me knows that that is one of my biggest pet peeves. If I'm looking at a deck and the copyright date is not the current year you're in, it's like, oh, come on, right? Just something simple like that. Third part is, with all of these assets and everything that's available to you, are you able to get it at the right time during the customer's journey? Or is it pushed to you at the right time during the sales journey? So, for example, are we trying to push things in the last month of the year? Are we trying to push things in the last week of the quarter? That's not the time to do it. It doesn't get any attention. But from a seller's perspective, they don't want to be taught all about how to create a proposal in their first week of joining the company. Make sure it's available when they need it, right? So they can go and get it when they need it. Just in time is what I like. It's just in time enablement. And then the last part of it is the tribal knowledge piece of it. And the tribal knowledge being what's working and what's not, right? If it's not working, find out about it early and make sure you stop doing that, right? It sounds like a simple thing, but it's kind of hard if you don't connect. And then the last part of it is, if it is working, how do you make sure everybody can see it? How do you make sure everybody understands it and everybody can use it? And you only get that by being connected to the folks that are out there in the field with your customers, whether they're sellers or anybody who is customer facing. You can get feedback from non-sellers. You can get feedback from solution engineers. You can get feedback from legal folks. You can get feedback from finance. You can get feedback from everywhere.
And since you are here on the business of story, of course, I put everything through a story lens, and everything you just talked about right there is, do you have your story straight? Do you have the assets in place? Are you all telling the same story? Do you have a common language around this story? Do you understand the journey that your customer is currently on and where they are in their story so that you can connect your story to theirs? So fascinating. I'm so excited about covering this with you today. Now, Sheevaun, what about your backstory? You are one of the foremost enablers, business enablers, not only maybe in North America, but the world. How did you find yourself in this role? Did it come to you naturally? And give us a little of your backstory.
So I was fortunate that my parents got into computing and CAD and all that early, right? So when I was a teenager, early 20s, they were doing that. And so I was indoctrinated from an early age. My career was not a ladder, right? You hear people talk about career ladders, and I'm like, well, good for you if you actually had one. Mine was much more of a jungle gym, right? So it's like, did that work? No, that sucked. Okay, let's not do that again. Where do I go now? What am I going to try? So I did lots of things. I was a processing operator.
Let me ask you, what in your jungle gym, what sucked? Take us to one of your jobs that you got into and you go, no, I'm not doing this.
Coding.
Yeah.
I went back to school for, essentially an IT certification. And when I came out, I was coding. And I realized really quickly that putting me in a cubicle and telling me to write code was not the best use of my skills. I got bored so fast. And it's like, this is just awful. So then what I started to do was systems analysis and design. That I liked because I could be creative, right? I could say, okay, and of course, back in, when the earth was cooling, people still had paper-based systems. And so my job was to help them go from paper to, to digitizing it. So that was exciting. Then I saw somebody come in and give a training course. And I remember distinctly sitting in that room, seeing the Gatineau Hills in the background and seeing Lynn at the front of the room. I'm still in contact with her and going, that's what I want to do. I want to do something that's different every single day that allows me to use the skill set and the talent I have. So that's when I started getting into the pre-sales side of the business. So I did pre-sales for, a couple of decades, ran, a couple of global operations. It was awesome. Then in 2008, of course, the whole bottom fell out of the market. Everything fell out. And the company I was with said, all right, well, we have an option. Your option is we'll give you a really nice severance package, or you might want to consider trying this thing. We don't know what to call it, but all that stuff you do around solution engineering, can you do that with all of sales, everybody in sales? And I remember asking, I was, worked for a really visionary leader. And I asked Eileen, I'm like, what is that? She goes, I don't know, make it up. Right. Okay. So this is when, and I got to tell you, I bought a shirt the other day, and it's anybody who's a Star Trek fan knows it says red shirt across it, and then underneath it says I might not make it. So in my career, as I'm coming up through my jungle gym, I'm discovering that there's a lot of things that don't work. I tried everything. And the reason I'm in the position I'm in right now is because I made all those mistakes. And I didn't make them once. I didn't make them twice. I'd make them more than that. I can be a slow learner sometimes. And so that's kind of how I got where I am, right? If a Western, I'm the third one through the door, right? That kind of thing. It's you learn by making those mistakes. So I can tell you the 10 ways to do something and the 8 ways that are kind of sketchy and the 2 ways that'll work.
Gotcha. So now that you have been in enablement, I mean, how long have you been doing this? And it's essentially training, is it not? It's system design to figure out what's going to work for the country.
Training is an important part of it, but it's not all of it by any stretch of the imagination. Training is the end result that you get to, but it's all the work that's done in front of that that is so important.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's making the relationship with the stakeholders, with the leaders, right? When I started this discussion with you, I talked about running it like a business. I have my investors, and I talk about them that way. My investors are anybody who wants to give me money to run programs, right? Whether that money is to go towards headcount, toward software, hardware, programs, whatever it is. These are the folks. They're my investors. And it could be a C-level, could be CRO, could be anything like that. And then there is the supply chain part of the business, which is anybody who wants to put something in front of the sellers or whoever my stakeholders are. And those are the folks that we have the quid pro quo with. And so again, like a business, it is you marketing, typically it's where it comes from, right? Product marketing. You product marketing want us to take this brochure that you've just created with all this fancy words and everything and give it to the salespeople and have them introduce it to the customers. So a couple of things. Number one, it's in language that the customers and the sales reps typically don't use. Number two, you're giving it to us as if it's top of the funnel. And by the time the customers come to us now, they're well down the funnel. We're not telling them what cloud is anymore. Everybody knows what that is. So what are we telling them? What we're trying to do is determine what kinds of open-ended questions can we ask that is going to allow us to start the discussion with the customers and show that we have a knowledge of where their pains might be, right? Otherwise, why are we even having this conversation? So in speaking with our marketing folks, we said, look, you give it to us answering 2 questions. First one being, as a seller, why should I even care about this, right? Because if you cannot prove value to a seller, they're not going to use it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, how is it going to help my customer buy from me? All too often, marketing has a tendency to try to tell sellers how to sell. You're in marketing for a reason. They're in sales for a reason. So rather than do that, right, tell me how this is going to help my customer. If you do that, then that is really going to open up the quid pro quo, because what does marketing want? Adoption. You give it to me like that, I'll give you adoption. And so all of this work that you're doing will actually be taken a look at. Because typically you look at a lot of companies and I think the highest I heard was 92% of what was created by marketing, never seen by sales. Right? So that's the part of it. And then there's the stakeholders who are for me, it's the sales managers. And this is why it goes back to your initial question, which is what is so important about this? And it's that relationship that you have with those sales leaders. Because without that relationship, doesn't matter how much money you throw in, doesn't matter the talent that you've got to do the job, doesn't even matter how good your programs are. They will fail. All it takes is one sales manager that has a lot of influence to say, this isn't working for me, I'm not going to do it, and it's done. But if you create your programs and you have buy-in from the very top, which is where a lot of this discussion comes from, right? You've got to be connected. If you have those discussions, then at times, and I've only had to do it a few times, those leaders will come in over the top and say, this is not optional, get it done, right? Doesn't happen often, but ever so often you need that. And to have that done, and they become the stick, right? You're the carrot, they're the stick. It means that people will continue to look at learning as an opportunity for career advancement and not as something that is repressing and time consuming and a real irritant in their life.
Yeah. I've seen that happen a lot with business of story training when I'm brought into a large brand. And oftentimes, they will say, we really want to do this, but we do need to get buy-in from this particular group. So would you be willing to do, a training for them so they could see it, they could taste it, whatever? And go, absolutely. So I'll do an abbreviated training, show them how they can use it immediately. And I started calling them these internal guiding influencers. And Sheevaun, some of the things that I found is sometimes they're not even related to title. It's who has the ear of that colleague internally. So it could be that head sales leader. It could be the C-suite. It could be a manager. Yeah. Or it could be a fairly new person who's just, outgoing. People trust them. And I say, don't get tied up in titles. Look at who are truly the influencers inside. Let's give it to them and train them. And then if they like it, let's make sure they like it. They will influence. Do you see that happen as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we do. You said at the beginning, right? My enablement has blown past the edges of sales, right? My enablement is actually for all of RingCentral. So we run all of the corporate onboarding and we run all of the sales onboarding, and one follows the other. So for the corporate onboarding, you can tell anybody that does any type of training or understands people at all knows that you can find out who your influencers are right off the bat. Right? They're in there within 2 days, who on this big group is actually going to be somebody that's going to be on your side, support you, be a mouthpiece, will be the megaphone that you need to make sure to get it out there, which is one of the really great things about sales training, right? The sales onboarding is that I know usually on the Wednesday, right, halfway through the week, I'll reach out to my team and say, okay, who are the problem children, right? First of all, because that's got to get corrected, not by us, by their leaders. Who are the problem children? And rarely is there no one. And then who are the ones that are really shining? We actually have a contest. And at the end of the week, the person that has the most points gets a very special gift that I'm not going to tell you because otherwise that would give it away. But they get a very special gift that is, we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
And so it's fun. And they're all working really hard to do it. So it's great stuff.
Just a couple weeks ago, Sheevaun, I had Wayne Maloney on, and he is a biz dev strategist, enablement guy out of Australia. And they've got a new book out, and it's a really fascinating book. But he talked about the 6 different archetypes that you come across in selling. And we went through and covered them. And I would imagine you're seeing kind of the same thing, that you see these similar personalities when you are in trying to get an enablement program funded, adopted, used, measured, and whatever. And you have to really kind of know how to approach each of those different personalities from their point of view to get them to buy in, I would imagine.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I'm not sure what the 6 archetypes are, but I can tell you that when we first started our onboarding program, for example, it was a one size fits all. There were only 3 of us. That was it. Right. And one of them decided to leave. So then it was down to 2 of us. So it was like, okay, so we needed to create something. We needed to change the way we were doing it and bring in new capabilities and a new way of doing it. And then we needed to decide when were we going to update it. So we did it through the first half, second half of the first year we were together. And then in the next year in January, we did 2.0. 2.0 is where we started to say, okay, by segment, for example, we need to split this out so that we recognize that what we need to do, not only from training, but from enablement as well for an enterprise rep that has experience, is going to be quite different than a BDR. BDRs are typically not as experienced.
What's
they need
a BDR?
More hand-holding. A business development rep.
Thank you.
Right. So, a sales development rep or a BDR, the folks on the phone, right, either outgoing or incoming, they need to have more hand-holding. So when you're doing a training, it's usually more involved. There might be certifications there, assessments, things like that to see whether or not they get it, lots of role playing. Whereas when you're talking about the highest end of the business on the enterprise side, all you really want to do there, especially for the high performers, is just get out of their way. Otherwise, we can, for example, get, I talked about the relationship with marketing. We can get that deck that comes in with the, what's in it for me and how's it going to help my customer buy. And we may have the BDRs and the inexperienced ones go through all of it. Whereas for enterprise, we may end up with a single PowerPoint slide to say, hey, this is what changed. Here's where you find it. And that's it, right? Just get out of their way. There's no assessment. There's none of that. But make sure, as I said, when I talked about, are they going to find it at the right time during the journey? So, for their customer, and are they going to be able to find it at the right time for their sales efforts as well in the sales process?
So let's do some level setting on the environment in which you work. RingCentral, real quick. What is RingCentral for those that don't know?
So RingCentral is a telecommunications company. And what we do is we provide the full environment for people to be able to connect with others. So whether that is via phone, via video, via chatting, fax, right? All
Fax.
of these are fax. We even have some companies that are still faxing. And so what it is a single environment that you can run off a single device, whether that's your phone, where it's a desktop. So for example, I'm talking to you right now. Let's say we're having a conference call and I realize, my son is called from school. I need to go. I can automatically, without shutting you down and restarting, I can just say transfer from my desktop to my phone and off we go. And away we go. So it's a technology that allows you to communicate from wherever, with whomever, whenever you want to.
How old is RingCentral?
Just over 20 years old.
It's a $1 billion operation, right?
Yeah, definitely $1 billion operation. When I started during my stand and deliver, right, I made a very bold statement and said, you told me you're going to be $1 billion in 5 years. At the time, that would have been 2022. And I said, you put enablement in and we'll get us there in 2020. And of course, they're like, yeah, okay, fine. January 2020, we hit $1 billion. I was like, yes, okay. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I threw it out there anyway, right? It's like, bring me in, let's do this. And
did they know what you were talking about? I mean, that question again of enablement, how much did you have to sell them on it and define what it meant to them?
I had to define what it meant. What they thought was that it was organized, controlled, scalable training. And again, yeah, that's a piece of it. But that is not what we bring to the table. What we bring to the table is the skill set of understanding what sales is about and how sales works, understanding how our customers need to receive this information, right, and how they need to work together, as well as understanding how to deliver it in a way that is going to help adults learn. And it's that combination of the two or three or four, all of these different skill sets we bring to the table that allows us to be able to talk to our stakeholders and their stakeholders and pretty much anybody in the company about what is the best approach in order to help our customers buy from us.
How many people do you train in a given year? If
you include turnover as well, we're probably looking in the 5,000 to 6,000 range. We've got very active onboarding. Well, actually, it's actually more than that, because when I think about this year specifically, in February, we had our global kickoff. It wasn't just a sales kickoff. We decided as a company that we would do it for everybody in the company. So we had 8,500 people being trained. Over 1 million minutes of video were watched in a 4-day period.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Right. I'm glad you brought that up, because it was unbelievable. There was a contest. So whenever you dangle a contest in front of people, they're like, I want it. But what it did do is it made sure that, and again, what we focused on was go to market. How do you use the assets? What's there? When do you use them? And how do you provide us feedback? That's what we focused all of it on, and all of it around our employees. So it was very much employee based. And that was what we did. And my team essentially ran that. And it was awesome. It turned out great.
How many employees does RingCentral have?
8,500.
Oh, okay. So you pretty much trained everyone.
Full-time employees. Yeah, full-time employees, I think we have just over 6,000. But then there's another 2,500 to 3,000, I don't have the exact number, that are contractors.
And so when you're training them, I think a lot of people always start with, well, this is sales training. I'm not in sales. So you must be able to or have to position your enablement program to different people who kind of maybe push back and say, I'm not a salesperson, Sheevaun. Why do I need this?
Because what I'm talking about, those four things that I spoke of, matter for everybody in the company, whether the only difference is how their performance is measured. Salespeople are measured by revenue and quota attainment. Legal folks are measured by the number of contracts that they can push through, right? But everybody needs to understand who we are. Everybody needs to make sure that what they are producing or what they're doing is in line with who we are. Everybody needs to know where to find things, and everybody needs to be able to provide feedback. So that was a proposal I gave to RingCentral about 3 years ago. And last year is when it came through. At the end of last year, they said, okay, do the voodoo that you do for the whole company. And so I went from just sales enablement to all of the customer training falls under me now. All of the partner training and the partner enablement falls under me. All of the developer training falls under me. So every part of the company, as well as all the go to market and like the GKO and when we have a product release, that all falls underneath my team because everybody needs to know it. We can be specific about how it's delivered, but everybody still needs to get it.
Yeah. Of course, mine was a very loaded question because my argument is, and feel free to argue with me on this, everybody is in sales, whether you like it or not, because you're always trying to get someone to buy into your way of thinking, funding your particular program, all the way up to selling customers on your product or service. We are all in sales.
We're all in sales. I mean, one of the major parts that's taught during our onboarding process for the sales teams is presentation skills. Is how do you get that message across? And of course, now we've got this whole new module around the web-based, right? How do you do the, video-based discussions? But everybody's a seller. Everybody is. You're all representing your company, whether or not you're on normal, productive company calls, or whether you are talking to your grandmother. You're still selling. My day, every single part of my day is selling something. My people, my programs, my successes, my ideas, right? I'm doing that every single day, all day long.
And you have kids, right?
I have 2 kids. I've got one who just started college, and I've got one in grade 10.
And
who's a sophomore in high school.
Are you not constantly selling to them, trying to get them to buy into your way of going about life?
Oh my God!
That's what we do.
I had a really funny discussion with my mom. My younger son wanted to get on one of those 2-wheeled skateboard thingies that are so dangerous. And I said, if you're going to do it, you have to put pants on because he loves those Adidas shorts. And he's like, but I don't want to. And I tried to explain to him why it's important for safety reasons and everything else. He's like, well, I can't find any. I'm like, I'm sure you've got some in your drawer. Go look. And he finally came back to me and he's like, I don't understand. And out of my mouth came the words that I heard when I was a kid, which was, because I said so. I picked up the phone. I called my mom right then, and I said, I get it. Now I understand. And she laughed. And ever since then, I've been apologizing for all the stuff I did when I was a kid. But it's like, because I said so.
My dad was a brilliant storyteller, a little Norwegian guy out of North Dakota, a civil engineer. People hear me talk about him a lot because he was a very, very important figure in my life. And he had the single best opening line for every story of advice. And that might be, a guy might think about, and then he would go on from there. He would never say, Park, what in the hell are you doing? Park, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Park, you should do this. Never. He would just say, a guy might think about. It was always third person. Yeah. And I'm telling you, it was always really powerful.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. I love that. That's like a lot of the, diversity and inclusion discussions, right? People are like, well, how do you start it? You can start it with, I couldn't help but notice ... Right? I mean, it's a great way to start that discussion if you see something that seems, non-diverse, right? Or somebody is saying something or whatever it is, you can start the conversation with that. I couldn't help but notice.
Yeah, you really want to start with that statement of agreement, as we talk about with the and button there for the ABT that we train on, instead of coming in with a problem or an opinion or an assertion, which is going to push your audience away, let's validate them. And maybe the way they're currently seeing the world, whether you agree with how they currently see the world or not, really doesn't matter, because your whole goal is to get them to see it your way. So we always start with that.
Executive Leadership Coaching 101.
Yeah.
Validate and acknowledge. Then you can go and talk about what the situation is.
And that's the beginning of the ABT, the and, Sheevaun, you this, and it's important to you because of this, but I couldn't help but notice that it's not happening because of this. Therefore, let's maybe consider doing something like this. Or my dad, a guy might think about just setting that up.
Exactly.
But here's why that's not happening for that guy. So the guy might consider doing something like this. It's great. It's great fun. Speaking of communication training, storytelling, and so forth, how do you overlay that on your enablement programs?
So we've done a lot of work recently, especially with internal folks, trying to get them to understand how communication works based on the media you're trying to use. If you're on the phone, there's a lot of training that's already out there about phone etiquette and all of that kind of good stuff. The big thing that we're dealing with now, of course, is how does this work, right? Back and forth. How do I make sure that Parker and I actually have a connection where it feels like we have a connection? And so there are a number of ways that you do it, right? The first one is you look at the camera. You have to be able to do that, right? The second one is to make sure, and that you and I have both been doing it, which is showing our hands, right? Even though the human brain, right? I mean, just go a little neuro here. The human brain is actually, two different pieces. And part of it is the limbic system, which is a fight or flight. And even though we may not even notice it, there are things about this particular type of communication that make it difficult for us to listen, to pay attention, to do all of those things. One being what's in somebody's hands, right? When we were cave people, if somebody came in with a big club, even though it's not current anymore, if you show your hands, especially your palms, people will relax a little bit more, right? Exactly. So use your hands, don't hide them, because that's the equivalent of putting your hands in your pocket. And it doesn't do that. Making eye contact to your camera. Yeah.
I call that the Rachel Maddow effect. If you ever watch her on MSNBC, she has all these histrionics, and she's just like her eye rolling and her arms swelling. And I'm to the point of, okay, it's actually getting in the way of just the news, so you can calm that down. But I find sometimes when I'm in a virtual session, I go all Rachel Maddow on people, open my eyes more and throw my hands around if I feel like I'm kind of losing the audience, or maybe I've been a little bit sedate. I mean, I'm not one to be sedate, but then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I need to pick the energy up a little bit. Just think Rachel Maddow. That's the way to do it for me.
Yeah, I do love me some Rachel, but you're right. You don't want to be landing planes. And that's usually what I tell people, right? It's not, right? All of that. You don't want to be landing planes. But you can use your hands for emphasis. You can use your body. You can use, right? If you sit and don't move, you're going to lose people. But you've been very animated. I've been very animated. And it makes a difference. People will pay attention because everybody wants to be entertained in some way or another, and to get out of their own head and to get out of all that noise and the chaos. And especially with all the technology we have now, how do you stay focused on somebody who's doing something? How can you make sure that when you're communicating, people are paying attention, right? You do that in a variety of ways. One of them, of course, is you see my background and you do the same. I don't have a virtual background. Virtual backgrounds are exhausting, right? Stanford actually did a study, and they're now calling it ZEF, Z-E-F, which is Zoom exhaustion fatigue, right? That's what they're calling it, Stanford researchers. And it's all of these things around this kind of communication that can be difficult if you're not using it the right way. And one of the things they say is get rid of virtual backgrounds. Be yourself, be who you are, right? Let people understand and see the person that's there. Because right now, all I've got right now is a 2-dimension of who you are. But if I look in your background, I can see, right? Nice warm wood and the plant and, things like that.
Piano,
it just gives this sense of comfort. A piano, right? So he's creative, right? He's got great taste in furniture,
That's my wife. I don't.
All,
I just drag it in. She's got the taste, but I call it the zombie apocalypse. Because we've all become these zombies on Zoom. It's a little bit like a Turkish prison visit, isn't it? I mean, we have our colleagues and loved ones on the opposite side of the plexiglass, and we're like tapping on the window saying, "Get me out of here." But we're stuck with it for quite a while. It's not going to be changing anytime soon. Are you guys working in person, or are you pretty much all virtual at this point?
No, there is some in person that's starting to happen, right? We've got a lot of rules around, how we are going to return to office and what kind of gatherings you can have, and right. So our internal folks at RingCentral are being very, very careful globally to make sure that we don't put anybody at risk. So, I don't want to get political, but vaccinations and, all that kind of stuff, right? If you're going to get together as a team, there are certain rules that you have to follow so that everybody's going to be safe. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of it. But we are getting together. Back at the beginning of July, I got my leaders together for the first time in a year and a half, because after a year and a half, nobody feels connected, even if you've got the skill set on how to do it here, right? I had the two people I had that had started during the pandemic and quit during the pandemic, never got the opportunity of getting a Sheevaun hug, put that in quotes, right? Never got the opportunity of being in the same room with their colleagues. And so it's hard, and it's hard to connect. It's also really, really easy to disconnect if all you've got with somebody is this two-dimensional screen.
Yeah. Yesterday I drove down to Phoenix. It's about almost 2 hours from where I live up here in northern Arizona in the Pines. And it was the first fundraising event I went to. It's the Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona Empower Breakfast. And it's their one real in-person fundraising. They couldn't do it last year because of COVID. They did a drive-in thing, which sounded like was kind of weird. I didn't make it, but everyone was commenting on it yesterday. But the most interesting thing to me, Sheevaun, was that, pre-COVID, we end up going to lots of fundraising breakfast, lunches, and dinners and those sort of things, and they become a drag. You see people across the room, and they kind of make eye contact and kind of wave at you and then go on. It's like people are there surfacely. They weren't really connecting. I got to tell you, yesterday was so astounding. People, as I walked in, I didn't realize how many people I knew or knew me, and in the past may have seen me across the room and just let me keep going or whatever. They were hungry for contact. And it wasn't just me, of course. It was everybody there. The dialogue, the conversations, it was electric, even as people just showed up, and it blew me away. It's like, wow, here are Homo sapiens coming together for something maybe in the past that they did so often. It wasn't as important to them, and yet yesterday it was just this community like I had never seen before. It was really, really powerful.
I think we've learned a lot of lessons around this. I think we've learned that you have to have that humanity in the way that you deal with people, whether you are doing the personal type of connections like you're talking about or connecting with prospects or anything like that. You have to be human. You have to be forgiving, right? You have to be empathetic to what people are going through because number one, you don't know what their story is, what's going on in the background, right? I mean, you look at what's in my background right now, just to be, it looks nice and settled, and everything from shoulder down that you can't see is chaos, right? So, and there's bits and pieces here that are, part of my life and everything that's going on. I could at any point we've got a 5-month-old puppy. The 5-month-old puppy could come in at any point and jump around and do all of that. And in the past, we would have been mortified. Now I'll pick them up and show them to the people that are on the camera, right? And it's understanding that we're all human and we all have needs and we all have the requirement for connection. Even introverts. I'm like on the 75-80% scale on an introvert. Hard to believe, I know, but it's true. So I recharge by being alone and doing all of that. Right now, I am a beacon of light. I've recharged enough. Thank you very much. Even introverts want to get out there, right? So it's, I'm bright. Good. I'm good. Let me
Sheevaun, I have a theory on that introvert thing because all of the really fabulous people, the enablement folks like yourself and the trainers always claim to be introverts. I mean, 9 out of 10 will say they're introverts, and they are. I think it's the exercising of that introvert demon that comes out in you and in the most positive ways that shows you are an extrovert. But without that introvert force internally, maybe you wouldn't be nearly as effective as you are as an enablement professional.
I would agree. I mean, I think I don't have any issue getting up on stage or doing sessions like this and really talking about what my purpose is and my passion. And, I've been very, very fortunate over the years to have some amazing mentors and trainers and all that. And it's my turn to give back, right? I've been in business long enough. It's my turn to give back. And that's what my day is made up of. However, and if I'm up on stage at some big event, right? I think the biggest number of attendees I had was 6,000. I'm awesome, running around the stage, everything's great, all of that. The moment I come off that stage and somebody wants to be social and shake my hand, it's like, ooh, it's like,
leave me alone.
Leave me alone. I'm done. I'm worn out, right? But that's the introvert side, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that I'm an extroverted introvert, depending on whatever the scenario is that I'm doing at the time.
Well, thank you for bringing both of those characters to our show today. I really, really appreciate your time and your insights. Where can people learn more about you or follow you or learn from your wisdom? Where are you sharing your thoughts these days online?
So on LinkedIn, you can connect with me with using my email, which is just sheevaun@gmail.com. I know that you'll have the spelling somewhere, so they'll be able to see it. Or Twitter is just Sheevaun T. I don't tweet a lot, and I do put some stories into LinkedIn, but they're usually very, very personal ones that I will do that are effective. My recommendation is that people join the Sales Enablement Society, because that's where you're going to get a lot of it. That's where I'm very active. And so it's secociety.org.
Tell us a little bit about that.
When I started all of this in 2008 as a real profession, there was no network. There was no one for me to turn to, which is why, right, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. All the red, that's why there was no one for me to look to. And shortly after, probably, I guess, I don't even know, 6 or 7 years ago, Forrester started with the sales enablement thing, right? Gartner didn't believe it existed, but Forrester did. And the gentleman there, his name is Scott Santucci, was the senior analyst for enablement at Forrester. And so I got to know him, and they had a couple of conferences, and it was awesome, right? I think the first one, there were about 400 of us in the room, and Scott asked how many people have a title of sales enablement, and 3 of us put our hands up. That gives you an idea what that was like. But over time, things have changed. And then Scott was in DC. He decided when he left Forrester, he didn't want to leave the community. So he got some of the enablement folks he knew together. And that was the start of it. He came out here in, I think it was April 2016, something like that. Came out here to the West Coast and got 16 of us together and said, do you think this will fly? And we're like, we're all in. We now have over 10,000 members. It's a global organization. There are chapters all over the world. And it is that the great thing about it is, number one, it's not sponsored by any vendor, which means the discussions are really free and open. It is folks that really do want to help each other and folks that really do want to learn. And especially if you're new to enablement, get on there, join the group, be part of it, because any question you ask on the forums will be answered by a zillion people, right? You can follow on LinkedIn as well. Lots of content there as well.
And what was that URL again?
SE Society, as in Sales Enablement Society, secociety.org.
.org. Awesome.
I'm on the board of advisors. So I want people to join. I don't want people to have to go through, not having someone to turn to. And there's a lot of people out there. There's all sorts of information available now.
Well, that's fantastic. We will definitely have that link in our show notes as well. So, Sheevaun, thank you so much for being here. Just a terrific conversation.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
And thank you all for listening to this edition of the Business of Story Sales Enablement. In all of the episodes I've done, and what is this, number 335, I believe, we've never touched on sales enablement. And so who better to do that with than with Sheevaun? If you liked what you heard and you've got colleagues that can benefit from this short discussion, by all means, feel free to share this episode with them and check out the Sales Enablement Society. Sounds like a marvelous, marvelous group of 10,000 people. And what really struck me, what Sheevaun said is, this is a fairly new phenomenon in business if you think about it. It's only been around 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So something that's growing. And for, career folks out there, this may be something, if you're not yet into sales enablement, may be a really nice career pivot for you in some aspects. So check it out. Of course, if I can be of service to you in your storytelling needs with your sales programs, with your enablement programs, and with your marketing, visit me over at businessofstory.com. And until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you like Sheevaun, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening. Excellent.